a lot of people have asked me to share insights about building an community online. And what often surprises them is when I say that there was a point in time when there were about 50,000 people following Tiny Buddha, but there wasn't yet a community. So I was sharing ideas that appeared to resonate with people, and they were retweeting them, but there were a couple things missing, and that was that I wasn't engaging with people, and people weren't engaging with each other through or around Tiny Buddha. There weren't conversations happening. People might get the quote and then share it, but people weren't really talking about it. So what I learned is that there's a difference between an audience and a community. And that might sound really obvious. But I find that a lot of people come online and start a blog and they say, I want to build a community. I want to build a place where like-minded people can come together and share ideas that matter to them and inspire each other. But then their actions say, I'm looking to build an audience. With an audience, there's a sense of removal. There's a disconnect. It's expert to students. It's talking at. Whereas with the community, there's a sense that we're all in this together. No one's above the other. We're here to help each other. We care about things together. An audience is passive. A community's active. An audience watches or listens or reads, whereas a community is actively involved. So what I'd like to do is back up a little and share how I started with good intentions, but drew an audience, and then eventually shifted gears and honed my purpose and started building the community that I really hoped to build to make the kind of difference that I wanted to make. So as Mario said, Tiny Buddha was a Twitter account first, and it was, it was a cute little icon, a Buddha symbol. It's a catchy name, Tiny Buddha, and it was just one daily quote. There was no agenda. There was no link to anything, not selling anything, and it was anonymous. So people saw it as kind of a service for them. Just get a daily thought from Tiny Buddha. The Tiny Buddha will bring you wisdom was the sole line on the bio for a while. And also, it was just one thought, which is kind of odd on Twitter. I'm sure you all have people you follow who tweet, once an hour, or especially a lot of accounts that are giving motivational or inspirational sayings. There are a lot of thoughts coming through. But I personally believe that fewer words have a stronger impact. They sit with you. You think about them. It's like, okay, that's the Tiny Buddha thought for today. Right? Silence is a powerful thing. So that was what I thought with a Twitter account. But about a year into it, I realized there was some irony. So, I started this as a way to do something meaningful online, to feel like I was helping people. And I was tweeting a lot of ideas about passion and meaning and happiness and figuring out who you want to be and actually being that person. All the quotes sort of addressed universal problems. And yet I still wasn't really filling the bulk of my time in a way that felt meaningful to me. And that's kind of ironic. I recognized that it's a lot easier to consume information than it is to apply it. You can follow tons of inspirational Twitter accounts and fill your Google Reader with motivational blogs and have a whole bookcase full of self-help books and motivational and spiritual texts, and yet not actually do anything to make positive change in your life or in other people's lives. So that's what I wanted to do with the website. That's when I wanted to go to tinybuddha.com. And I wanted it to be a place where anybody could submit a story about applying wisdom to real life. It would start with one of the daily quotes, and then it would be an honest, authentic story about what it means to put that in flesh and blood. And it might be about successes, or it might be about struggles. But it would inspire us all to think about, what that really means in real life. And I wanted it to be a community-focused site. So I had run the Twitter account anonymously. It made sense to me to go into the site that way. What I did not want it to be was a before and after picture. This is my blog. I used to be so unhappy. I'm really happy now, and here's how you can do it too. I wanted it to be, okay, you know what? I'm still not happy 100% of the time. I'm a human being, like we all are, and that's just a reality of life, that there are going to be some days that are good and some days that aren't, and how do we work together, and how do we increase the ratio for ourselves and collectively? Let's all be just really honest here. No one's an expert. I'm definitely not. My theory is, if you say you're an expert on wisdom, there's probably something wrong there, because there's a lot that we don't know at any given time. So that's what I wanted the site to be, And I felt I had good intentions in keeping myself out of it, to keep the focus on everybody. But here's how this played out. So I got a list of all the bloggers that were currently writing about similar topics, meaning and happiness and passion, and I sent them an email, and I said, okay, well, Tiny Buddha currently has about 50,000 followers on Twitter, and here's my idea for the site. I want it to be a place where we all share ourselves really honestly and openly about our struggles and our successes. And then I signed it Tiny Buddha Founder. So I asked people to share themselves, and I didn't share my name, which is incredibly ironic. But a lot of people, I find, might not go to such an extreme, but there is definitely a disconnect in what they're sharing. There's a limit, there's a line with just how vulnerable they're willing to be, which for all intents and purposes is pretty much the same as not putting your name on it. It's not fully showing up. So as you can imagine, in the beginning, the website was slow moving. The Twitter account kept growing because people liked a daily thought, but the website really wasn't adding value in a significant way. I was writing as a contributor, not as the founder, and I was trying to solicit other people to be part of the blog, but I wasn't fully in it. You know, my posts had a sense of detachment. I'd have my lessons in there, and I'd, share a little about myself, but there was a hesitation, which I think is very common when you're writing on the internet, because there are lots of eyeballs on it, and as the website gets bigger and bigger, or any website gets bigger and bigger, there's a sense of, okay, how much do I really want to put out there? And how much should I hold back to maintain a sense of authority? And what's my personal brand, and does this align with it? But I realized at some point that if I want to create a community where people open their hearts, I need to open my heart. I need to lead the way. I need to show what that looks like to be really authentic and honest. And so I started to do that. I started to write blog posts where I just kind of put my humanity out there. I wrote one post called How to Love Your Authentic Self. And I acknowledged in this post that for most of my life, for the bulk of the earlier part of my life, I didn't even slightly like myself. And I was always desperate for people's approval. And that I'm not 100% now unconcerned with what you think. I really want people to like me. But I try every day to focus a little more on loving myself. And in doing that, that's helping me create the change I want. So these are the type of posts I put out there, just really vulnerable writing. And a lot of people started to comment like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one that felt that way. Or, I feel a sense of relief to see that in words. And an interesting thing happened. It was a catharsis to write it and for people to read it, and they started wanting to have that catharsis, and they wanted to generate these responses in other people. They wanted to be able to say, okay, this is who I am. Take down the barriers, this is who I am, and they wanted other people to say, okay, I can relate. So the posts started coming in far more regularly to a point where I'd have a month worth of posts. I post every day. I'd have a month worth of posts lined up. And one thing that I've also done along the way is that I've put a lot of individual attention into absolutely every connection. And people will say to me, well, how do you find the time to do that with, a large following? And it helps that, I'm not getting hundreds of thousands of emails every day, but I make the time because my heart is in this site. And this is the most important thing to me, not the growing follower count, but every individual connection. And when a writer sends in a story, sometimes people have really powerful stories, and really powerful insights and great ideas, but they're just not writers. And that is, I am a writer by trade. It's what I've studied, and it's what I've done for the past decade. So I'll go back and forth, and I'll try to get them to open up. I'll say, okay, what did you feel here? Playing therapist a little. How did you feel when this happened? And I'll ask, tell a little more. Can you give me a little more information about this story? Or, just to get them to open up a little more honestly. And it's amazing how this has a profound effect on people. It makes everyone feel like we are all in this together. Another thing that I've done is I've created a really safe space for these conversations to happen, because that's what it's all about. People want to have conversations that maybe they're not having somewhere else. Otherwise, there's no real draw to have them if they can have them anywhere. When people are talking about those things that maybe people are afraid to put out there, this is where they're going on. So I take a very active role in comment moderation. I tell people, I'll email them and say, your comment was kind of hostile. And I know that's probably not what you meant, but I didn't want to hurt the writer's feelings, so perhaps you could rephrase it. And I make every connection valuable in this way. And the last thing that I've done is through social media. Now, in the beginning, it was all Twitter. That's where the bulk of the followers are. But when I launched the Facebook page, I realized that there's something very valuable about Facebook. Because on Twitter, you might share an idea, and your followers see it, and they see it, they share it, and their followers see it, and it's all a little fragmented. There's not really a communal hub where everyone can come together and talk. And that's what Facebook is. It's a page where you can see a conversation and get in on any conversation. So I'd start to ask questions on Facebook where I saw people were commenting a lot. I'd say, how do you forgive someone when it's hard? Or how do you simplify your life? Crowdsourcing wisdom. And hundreds of people will respond. And then I'll take these and I'll form blog posts out of them that I put on the site, and then I link to Twitter. So I'm creating kind of a synergy between all these different platforms and reinforcing my main message, which is that this is not about me or any one person. We all have something valuable to share. There's a tiny Buddha in all of us. So that's the main idea of what I've been putting out there. And I'd like to actually read you 2 quotes that I wrote down. One is from a writer who shared a blog post on the site about finally opening up after years of being emotionally shut down. And yes, a lot of the topics are a little touchy-feely, but his post was called "We Have the Power to Choose," and it was a really popular post. And he wrote, after getting lots of comments, "I was a little nervous about sharing this, but I'm so glad that I did. I feel less alone and a sense of community in the world." And then I also go back, and people send me a lot of emails for advice. And I try to answer all of them thoughtfully to the extent that I can. And one woman wrote this to me just yesterday. "You, your site, and those who contribute to it are inspirations that people like me need in our lives to realize that we are the inspirations too." That's why I run Tiny Buddha. I think that's why most of us want to build a community. It's kind of like what Jessica and Court were saying before. It's not about giving things to people. It's allowing them to see what they can give themselves and then give forward. So if I have 3 suggestions, if you have a blog is really what I'm speaking to, because that's my experience. If you're looking to build an audience around your writing online, my first suggestion is to share yourself authentically. It's very tempting to create a personal brand and to box yourself into it. And to some extent, if you're going to be selling something, and let's face it, we all need to make a living, a lot of us are, there needs to be some sense of, you need to build some sense of authority. But I think that there's something very powerful about authenticity, particularly because it can be rare. And I think that when people see somebody who's willing to just not necessarily be fully transparent, I don't tell everyone everything, but to be able to just own some of the things that most of us feel but won't say, when people see that, it reminds them that it's not only okay to be how they are, that it's beautiful, and people want that. They're attracted to it. A persona draws an audience. A person leads a community. My next suggestion would be to release the need to control where the conversations are happening. So I've seen a lot of bloggers say, okay, there are a lot of comments going on Facebook, and I want these conversations in my forums on my site, or I want these conversations on the blog posts themselves. This is where I want them to happen. But I think that's missing out on an amazing opportunity. My philosophy has always been, wherever the conversations are happening, well, fan the fire there, because that's where they're happening. A bigger picture perspective here is that it's not necessarily about the page views to a site. There's some brand awareness going on when people are talking about what you're doing. It doesn't matter necessarily where the conversations are happening. It matters that they're happening. And the last suggestion that I would offer is to focus more on providing value than driving growth. So if you don't have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands followers, you can feel like you're not making a difference. But when one person is truly and genuinely inspired, that has a ripple effect that you can't possibly see or measure. And that does eventually create organic growth. People feel a strong, passionate draw to brands with a strong, passionate message. An audience, they might listen to you. They might learn from you. They might even buy from you. But a community feels personally involved in your movement. They feel mobilized to take action on their own and collectively. A community cares. A community is a group of people who show up for each other. So one question that I would leave you with, and this is what I ask myself every day when I log on to Tiny Buddha or I open up the Facebook page or I get into the emails, is how can you show up fully and authentically for your community?